They ready to make me the king now. King boy. It's always been about money and still fuck all outsiders. Could all shine together. Big gentleman. Kitchen talk, still ain't turned my Scylla off. Killer talk, I'm still popping next, ain't turned my blender off. Wanna take over, you gotta kill a boss. I sent it off, he killed himself when he had cut them shipments off. Since grits are soft, I was taught to bag it, tie it and rip it off. Expose my flaw, stuck my neck out for niggas, they ripped it off. My mission been bought my niggas far. OG told me you ain't no boss till you put your nigga on. Hurt me to my core, I fell off and I seen my nigga flaw. Proud too strong, he know he wrong, I had to cut him off. 2 victims lost, so my only options to watch out for the triple cross. See me toss, know I'm getting them sent across on interstates. Pitching my bitch, extended my rental rates. My niggas ate, increased the stakes, seek bigger stakes. My city a different place. I ain't running off on my plug, nigga, I made a business play. 60K in 60 days, 50 states. Nigga, you remember me? Niggas ain't this shit for G. Promise ain't no checking me. Never let them lecture me. It's gon' end disrespectfully. I'ma find out what's best for me. Special G, I know it all. Silence helped me notice flaws. Solid, never spoke to laws. Flawless, I follow protocol. Plug before I ever rap. It sounds so good, they swear it's cap. They never had they cellular tap. Grown and never had a trap. Never had they package snatched. Know I got that package track. Still go to the post office asking them where my package at. I done sold 1,000 packs. Niggas ain't touched 50 balls. Do it overnight, dropping baggies off like I'm Santa Claus. Let me hear it.
Free your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. Free your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water.
Look, first off, you should understand that the big boss dog ain't got a rap. I do it for the ones who come from crumbs in the slums with the drums flipping the packs. My angle, I ain't gonna lie, that hoe a little obtuse, but I keep a blaming when I'm with my family, cause I'm prepared for whatever the ops do. Give props to me and L. Hell, we figured it out. Stay independent and keep a high percentage of my distribution. Word.
My bad. She was muted. What's up to Keenan? What's up to Teddy? What's up, Zane? What's up, Sean? We up early. I'm trying to knock this out real fast before but really, I ain't just really got to rush, but I wanted to knock it out before I went to my kids' football game they got today. What's up here, Black? Everybody in the place to be early in the morning. Edward Nagima, peace to you. Let's go. Boom, boom. Share my screen. I can't see nothing, so that's why it's gonna be quiet till I can't see the chat. I mean, assessing, code switching, and AAVE stands for African American Vernacular English. Research questions. What is code switching? Does code switching happen more through writing or speaking? What are the other terms for code switching? Why is code switching studied by linguists? Why do sociologists study code switching? What are some of the functions of code switching? What accounts for more than 10% of the code switches? Do people mark switching from native languages to a second language? What is African American vernacular English? Is African American vernacular English different from Ebonics? What is the origin of Ebonics and African American vernacular English? Take this quote to just start it off to speak means being able to use certain syntax, possessing the morphology of such and such a language, but it means above all assuming a culture and bearing the weight of a civilization. A man who possesses a language possesses an indirect consequence, the world expressed implied by this language. Fanon. We're gonna get into that. We're gonna dig into that with later on, not today though. You might see just one more quote, but we're supposed to do it, I think, tomorrow. Anyways, code switching. It's a quote from African Voices in Introduction of Languages of Africa by Vic Webb and Kimbo Sher. It is a very informative book that offers college-level linguistic competence on our people language. It actually defines code switching as language alternation across sentence boundaries. Hold on real fast. Hey, I don't care about none of that. Chill out. Oh. Code switching is the practice of moving back and forth between two languages or between two dialects or registers of the same language at one time. Code switching occurs far more often in conversations than in writing. It is also called code mixing, and style shifting is studied by linguists to examine when people do it, such as under what circumstances do bilingual speakers switch from one to another, and it is studied by sociologists to determine why people do it, such as how it relates to their belonging to a group or surrounding context of conversation. Chandra D.L. Waring is an internet article elaborates further on code switching when she states code switching is the practice of interacting in different ways depending on social context, and it isn't limited to race. Most of us interact differently when hanging out with our friends than we would during the job interview. However, due in large measure to structural inequality and centuries of segregation, different cultural norms and ways of speaking have emerged among white and black Americans. But because dominant culture is whiteness has been baked into the institutions as natural, normal, and legitimate. So there's much more incentive for our people of color to code switch, to adapt to the dominant culture, to improve their prospects. White people rarely, if ever, feel the same pressure in their daily lives. I can agree with that. Code switching performs several functions. First, people may use code switching to hide fluency or memory problems in the second language, but this accounts for only 10% of code switches. Second, code switching is used to mark switching from informal situations using native languages to formal situations using second language. Third, code switching is used to exert control, especially between parents and children. Fourth, code switching is used to align speakers with others in specific situations, e.g., defining oneself as a member of an ethnic group. Code switching also functions to announce specific identities, create certain meanings, and facilitate particular interpersonal relationships. Waring addresses in an article specifically mentioning the switch made by blacks when interacting with whites. In her article titled "What is Code Switching and Why Do Black Americans Do It?" she assesses benefit and consequence of the linguistic phenomenon via testimony of blacks themselves expressing their responses, ranging from interviewees bragging about their ability to code switch to some people, I'll say he's handsome versus he's fine as hell, girl. And I think I'm the baddest because I can talk to this group and that group in the same way that they talk to one participant in my study told me that he is perpetually self-conscious about code switching out of the fear that someone will witness his behavior and question his authenticity. Shit, that will happen. Boy's gonna call you out. And boy, what's you Oreo or something, kid? I mean, what you got going on? They gonna holler at, they gonna get at you. Boys don't like boys talking proper. But this is a video. I think this is the same lady. It's her TED Talk.
Three years ago, after moving back from Berlin, I had an experience with local law enforcement. I was living in an old family house at the time, but without a car. So typically, even when I was home, there would be no car out front. One afternoon, as I was going through old memories and moving around what seemed like to be 1,000 boxes, the blinds in my spare room were being shifted to and fro, as I was generally just cleaning out the space. My neighbor, an elderly woman, took it upon herself to be the unofficial neighborhood watch. And so seeing the blinds moving back and forth and no car out front in the driveway, she deduced that my home was being burglarized on a Sunday at noon and called the police. As I continued to clean, I was pretty unaware of what was going on outside of my house, but audible and unfamiliar voices prompted me to pause my cleaning activities and to go outside just to see what was going on. The scene that I encountered when I opened my front door is one that I will never forget. 4 police officers with guns drawn, one pointed directly at me, were surrounding my front porch. "Get out of the house, hands in the air now!" I froze. Up until this point, I had never actually seen a real live loaded gun this close to me, much less had one pointed in my direction. Now I'm here before you today because I obviously survived that encounter. I was able to collect myself enough to answer questions and prove that I had every right to be in that property. But what if I had not looked like me? What if I had not spoken like me? What if the person who opened the door looked like a thug? Whatever image that pops into your head when I use that word, what if the person who opened the door had not been able to collect themselves in the face of grave danger, confusion, and potentially even death to prove that they had the right to be on that property? What if I had expressed rightful anger for being mistreated by police in my own home? What if I had been a black man instead of a black woman? I raise these questions to illustrate the role that behavior plays as it relates to code switching. As a kid, I was inadvertently forced to learn to code switch, and perhaps in my case, that unintentional education saved my life. Code switching as a concept is really interesting. By definition, it's what happens when people who speak multiple languages alternate between 2 or more, oftentimes within the same phrase or sentence. In a more colloquial sense, code switching is what happens when people reflexively or subtly change the way they express themselves. So for someone like me, and I'm sure many of you all here, I thought up until about 4th grade that y'all was the correct contraction for you all. It was only after some point at around 9 or 10 that I learned that you all was the correct way to address a group of people, and that I should absolutely use you all, not y'all, when addressing important people and situations. As our world continues to be connected through technology of all sorts, apps and the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, I guess code switching makes a lot of sense as people from different backgrounds continue to come into close contact with one another. But when we look more closely at code switching, and who's expected to make the switch, we discover a hidden reality. And that reality is that the expectation of code switching threatens true diversity. My first day of third grade was at a new school, as I had recently been accepted to the gifted program, which meant that I would be bused from my neighborhood school of West Side to Tomoka in the next city over. The year was 1992, and so on the first day of class, I proudly donned my favorite Jodeci pleather new boots and my cross-color short set. To say that I stuck out like a sore thumb would be a grave understatement. My new classmates were in polite pastels and ribbons and bows and Kids Gap and Limited 2 fashions. I knew immediately that if I was going to fit in and make friends, I would have to change more than just a few things. So over the course of the next few years, I learned acutely how to do just that. I stopped wearing my Jodeci boots. I started choosing softer colors as opposed to the bright hip-hop colors and fashions that I had chosen previously. I started listening to Green Day, and I eventually learned how to act like my new classmates and eventual friends. Most importantly, though, I learned how to align myself not just so that I fit in, but so that I was culturally compatible. And I didn't know it then, but this is where I learned how to code switch and how to behave and speak in a way that made me a non-threatening person of color. As our society grapples with police brutality and protests against such violence have become synonymous with big brand ad campaigns and pop culture, it's a person's behavior which indicates whether or not they have learned the language of effective code switching. There have been countless instances in recent history where a person's ability or inability to code switch has meant the difference between life or death. Are you all familiar with Henry Louis Gates Jr.? Many people know him as the host of the PBS series Finding Your Roots, and still others may know him as an esteemed Harvard professor. Still others of us may remember him also from a 2009 incident involving Cambridge, Massachusetts police when he was arrested for breaking and entering into his own home. No doubt his ability to articulate and him being who he was and being able to explain the situation led to a relatively okay outcome for him, save the public humiliation of being arrested. For those who opt for authenticity, unapologetically deciding to speak with the accents of their homeland or their grandparents, or to wear their hijab, or to say y'all in the boardroom, there are oftentimes very real consequences that can be felt. Consequences like not getting that promotion because the client wants to speak to someone who sounds American, or being jeered at for wearing symbols of pride from your culture, while other people who appropriate that same culture make the pages of Vogue magazine. Or being told by HR or administration that your natural hair is inappropriate for work or school and will need to be changed to avoid disciplinary action. For those who aren't even deciding against code switching because they haven't learned it, the consequences can be even bigger. When I was a kid, I heard a lot of talk about Oreos. And I'm not talking about the delicious cookie sandwiches eaten best with a glass of milk, but I'm talking about the slang term, which refers to a person who's black on the outside and white on the inside. Kids definitely have a way of putting things plainly. But the concept always made me think a lot about myself, who I was and who I was becoming, where I lived and where my friends lived, the music I listened to at home with friends and family versus the music I was starting to listen to with my new friends at school. Deep down, I always felt like I had to hide certain parts of myself that I knew were still very much me. I had to be careful to not slip and say something too ghetto in front of my new friends, but I had to also be careful to not talk too much about cello or classical music when I was at home. For the person who's expected to code switch, to exist almost simultaneously in 2 or 3 different worlds, constantly presenting a slightly edited version of self, the pressure can be immense. But what if there was just one world where we could all be our true selves? Instead of the brand of diversity which purports that minorities are acceptable provided they behave in a specific way, what about a truer sense of diversity, where people are praised for their uniqueness and the cultural capital they bring to places and situations as opposed to being disciplined or shamed for it? What about an acceptance of different speech patterns, even within our own American lexicon, so that when a person says the word y'all, we appreciate what that might mean about their heritage or their upbringing as opposed to what we think it means about their level of intelligence? Or when we see a person with a hijab or an afro, we embrace the reasons for someone's decision to do or to be something different than we are. I truly believe that most of us think diversity is a good thing. Most of us understand that by exposure to people and places and ideas that are different from us, we actually end up being better, smarter, more compassionate people. But is belief in the goodness of diversity enough? In my professional life, I'm a tech founder. And thanks to biology, I happen to be a Black woman tech founder. My startup journey has been like a roller coaster ride without the seatbelt, similar to most people's. But it's because I've learned the language of code switching and checked some of the boxes that means I get access to some of the opportunities. I chose to be a tech founder because, like most ambitious people, I want to change the world in a positive way, even though the data says, specifically for my demographic, any kind of success in the tech industry is the least likely. In this case, when I speak of success, I mean the ability to raise capital to start, grow, and scale a venture. The National Center for Education Statistics reports that Black women are actually the most educated group in the United States. And a recent article from Fast Company highlights that we're also the largest growing sector of new business owners, with a whopping 265% increase in Black women-owned businesses from 1997 to 2014. Yes. Yet, when it comes to who receives the venture capital, particularly in the tech industry, women CEOs get just 2.7%. And women of color CEOs, we get 0.2%, also known as none. The cost of code switching on society is huge because it means that those of us who belong to minority groups spend a lot more time learning the language of cultural compatibility and less time doing the things that matter to all of us, like living, like spending time with friends and family, like starting successful businesses. As the tides of acceptance change in our nation and cultures continue to shift, I challenge all of us to really give every person, regardless of who they are, the space to really be and exist as their true selves. Because it's only when each of us can really live in our truth that we all gain the incredible benefits of true diversity. Thank you.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it was, there's, it's a paradox, you know what I'm saying? Because the shit is a schism. You basically damn near bipolar out here. You got to keep on switching. So it's going to always be some pros and cons to everything. But she seemed like she was, you know, you're going to really focus on the positive. But it's interesting, informative video. So, boom. Code stitching as a conceptual framework is comprised of a number of essential constructs, perspectives, and positionalities: insider, outsider status, gender, ethnic, racial identity, as well as actual code switching itself that serves as the spark that initiates the code of code stitching. Perhaps most critical is the environment that we have decried as the mediating context. The mediating context is comprised of people's, places, and positionalities. Each one of these contextual variables have implications for how individuals negotiate identity in a particular space. Is the appropriate response in the setting to switch of representative identities to fit the environment, or does the individual stitch these identities to his or her personhood, forcing the environment to fit who they are and what they represent? Said differently, I do not change myself to adjust to the environment, but the environment changes to fit me. Man, hold on. Damn. So that comes from P. Graham. I'm just gonna say it right here. This is a cohort of my auntie. Oh damn, that went way over here. Hold up. Me back out. I ain't mean to do that. I don't even know how I did that. Where I was at. Boom, boom, boom. Right here. You gonna give me a full screen? What's up? So Bequita Pegram is a cohort. Bequita Pegram is a Ph.D. student in the Educational Leadership Program at Prairie View A&M University. She is a cohort of my aunt, Professor Felicia Moore. She insisted, well, my aunt insisted that I, cite her on this because I didn't really know nothing about no code stitching. So that was some interesting stuff. This is her. I'm gonna try to probably see if we can get in contact with her and get her on the show. And probably, you know what I'm saying, interview her. Webb defines sociolinguistics as the study of language is in relation to society. Expounding further, the study of society is structured. Belief, traditions, and practices belong to discipline of sociology, and sociolinguistics is thus a hybrid discipline which combines sociological and linguistic concepts and techniques to study the role of function of language society. Wilson utilizes this approach in chapter 7, page 177, breaking down the sociocultural basis of language behavior, stating it is obvious to even the most casual observer that the different races and nationalities speak differently, that within races and nations, languages and dialect differ according to the region and cultural, class, and educational background. Yet, as we have documented in the foregoing section, no one is born speaking or born with a special predisposition to speak exclusively one particular language or only in his mother tongue. For apparent adaptive reasons, then human neonate is born with the capacity for learning to speak any language it is exposed to for a certain period of time. Consequently, regardless of race, the infant is capable of learning with equal ease any language he is exposed to for the first 4 to 5 years of life. These niggas here, man. An article significant to our discussion defines acculturation as a process through which a person or group from one culture comes to adopt the practices and values of another culture while still retaining their own distinct culture. This process is most commonly discussed regarding a minority culture adopting elements of the majority culture, as is typically the case with immigrant groups that are culturally ethnically distinct from a majority in the place to which they have immigrated. The so-called immigrant here is the African American. Blacks are the minority forced to accept English language, stripped of their native tongue, forced to assimilate. Cole clarifies the difference, stating acculturation is not the same as the process of assimilation, though some people use the words interchangeably. Assimilation can be the eventual outcome of the acculturation process, but the process can have other outcomes as well, including rejection, integration, and marginalization and transmutation. Oh man, they can't just be quiet. African American vernacular English. In an article titled "The Limits of the Standard English," explains African American vernacular English as a dialect no less complex or expressive than more prestigious. I messed up again. I can read it earlier. Forms of the language. It is to rule, bound, and systematic. It is also happened to Say it again. Be the means of communication of a marginalized, often economically disadvantaged group of people. In fact, African American vernacular English possesses at least one fine grammatical distinction that standard English completely lacks. Pullum explains that there is a remote present perfect tense in African American vernacular English, evident in expressions like she been married, where been is emphasized. This does not just mean, oh, hold on, yeah. Emphasize that this does not mean she has been married, but she is married and has been for some considerable time. In a similar way, the African American vernacular form, African American vernacular English form, be plus present participle, be walking, be singing, etc. It often mistaken for equivalent of the English present continuous tense, is walking, is singing. In fact, it marks what is called habitual aspect, meaning the action is performed as a rule, not necessarily right this minute. He sings, therefore, means not he is singing, but he sings as a hobby or professionally.
You don't talk right. You sound funny. Why are you speaking as though you're uneducated? For many African Americans, including myself, these sentences are merely common everyday occurrences. Maybe they say cuz instead of because, or maybe they say ax instead of ask, but it's something that we've all grown up hearing. And if hip hop is the most popular genre of music, why is this shaming of African Americans still prevalent in society? And what if I were to tell you that this was merely an innovation of the English language? Well, maybe that's true. Firstly, let's give this dialect of speech a name. AAVE, the acronym for African American Vernacular English, formerly known as Ebonics. To understand just how this came to be, we must first look at the 17th century plantations during the colonial periods, as slavery had just arisen in the Americas. Oftentimes, families were torn apart and those who spoke the same language were separated. So many slaves who were illiterate at the time had to pick up the language of those around them. This is why AAVE reflects the English grammatical system as well as is a dialect of English language. And it is also the only dialect of English that is not native to a specific region of users, with New England accents coming from the New England region, Bay Area accents coming from, well, the Bay Area, and yes, what I'm sure you're all quite familiar with here in Georgia, the lovely Southern accent. However, this took a change in the 1950s and 1960s with what is referenced by many historians as the Great Migration. The Great Migration references a period in which many African Americans left the sharecropping South in pursuit of factory jobs westward in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, as well as northwards with cities like Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and even Boston. And the language moved with them. And as many became more educated and were able to write, this dialect took on a written form. Here are some everyday phonetics of AAVE, and you might even know some of your own personally. As I did state, it is found in popular culture and in many of the songs you may listen to currently. Firstly, there is a dropped L sound in words like help becoming hep, and there's a dropped R sound in words like your becoming yo, and the suffixes are also relatively different. The TH sound often becomes a CH sound in words like with, and the SK sound becomes a KS sound in words like ask becoming ax. Here are some of my favorite uses of AAVE. When you first get home and you're putting up the groceries and you say, I'm put both of them on the counter. When you need to call back that relative and you say, I'ma call her later. And yes, my favorite, When your grandmother's picking on you and your mother says, leave that po child alone. AAVE is especially predominant in hip-hop, rap, as well as R&B, with many artists using it as a way to associate with their culture. AAVE oftentimes helps to form a sense of identity. However, many people say that AAVE is simply a degradation of music, and some have even been quoted to have said that hip-hop has done more damage in recent years has done more damage to African Americans than racism in recent years. However, as some shame its use, others applaud it, with Kendrick Lamar Duckworth, professionally known as Kendrick Lamar, winning a Pulitzer Prize for his 5th studio album. The Pulitzer Prize is usually awarded to those who are jazz musicians or classical musicians, but Kendrick Lamar made history in 2017 when he became the first hip-hop musician to receive such an accreditation. Kendrick Lamar, of his piece, was recorded by the judging committee to have said that it was a virtuistic collection of vernacular authenticity of the African American experience and hardships. Kendrick Lamar can have been quoted to have said in the song, "And if Anthony killed Ducky, Top Dog will be serving life while I grew up without a father and died in a gunfight," which is in his song entitled Duckworth, his homage to his family name and how many circumstances led him to become who he was with his newfound success. So, as you can see here, and if Anthony killed Ducky replaces the verb killed, dropping off the ed suffix, Top Dog will be serving life. You can see that the G is dropped off in the word serving, becoming servant. And while I grew up without a father and died in a gunfight, the D being dropped off of the word died. And although there are a lot of irregularities in this, Kendrick Lamar has been known to take on many, many adverse topics, ranging from police brutality to belief in a higher power such as a god, and even depression. Furthermore, as previously stated, there is a relevancy of Black identity in the songs, with them being the most popular artists of the genre. And this is a lot of the reason why you can play a lot of songs with sampling or even old hits, because streaming is so common nowadays. You can hear your dad say, "Girl, what you know about this?" A second aspect of AAVE that greatly differs from that of Standard English, the most common dialect of English, is the use of double negatives. Double negatives, an example of this would be, I don't have nothing. I don't have nothing in Standard English says, I have something. The two negatives canceling one another out, simply like in math. However, I don't have nothing in AAVE is a reaffirmation of the statement, I don't have anything. Reaffirmation works in English typically as the word very, in Spanish as the word muy, and in French as the word très. And no, I've never seen a French class in my life. This was patented by Robert Loth, who was an English professor who attended Oxford, and he was a prominent figure of the Catholic Church, and he wrote the novel A Short Introduction to English Grammar with critical notes. And this took a lot of influence around the 18th century as linguistic structure came to be. Notable users of the double negatives include Shakespeare and Chaucer, who are currently literary greats, and I've just completed reading Romeo and Juliet in my 9th grade literature class, and believe it or not, he did in fact do this. And it can be quoted in Richard III, where he has been quoted to have said, "I never was nor never will be." However, I think a lot of teachers might have a problem with the statement of Coolio, "Ain't no party like a West Coast party, because a West Coast party don't stop." Another aspect of AAVE innovating and adding to the English language is its use of tenses. Now, in English, as well as a few other languages, including Spanish, there are 3 main tenses outside of the infinitive. These are past, present, and future tense. But in AAVE, there is what is referenced as an occasional tense, which is not currently found in the English language as we know it. However, I will give an example of such. Using the verb to swim. The past tense of to swim in AAVE is he swam. The present tense, he swimmin'. The future tense, he gon' swim. And he be swimmin' works as an occasional tense, translating in Standard English to he swims occasionally. Now, you may argue that you just said he swims occasionally. There was no AAVE there. However, you have to change the verb that is being used in that sentence for that conjugation to work as such. Here, I can use A$AP Ferg, who is currently a part of the rap group A$AP Mob, where he's quoted to have said, "Fergie be mobbing all day." where an occasional tense is used. And I don't exactly know what mobbin means, but sure does sound cool in the car. Furthermore, what I'd like to conclude from the use of AAVE in English language is that it adds a cultural importance to many of its users, as when African Americans originally arrived in the Americas, there wasn't a lot of culture for us to have after it was written for centuries after centuries. Furthermore, it gives us a reclamation of our heritage and our culture, and we can help identify with those who use it as well. Furthermore, it influences popular culture in hip hop, R&B, and rap, as according to Billboard, it's the most popular genre of music by sales and downloads. I would also like to add that AAVE should not be seen as degrading of the English language because just like any other language, it adds to how people connect to one another. It also has its own sense of grammatical structures and how words can be used, and many people who identify and use AAVE can hear exactly when it's being used improperly. Thus, if you were to compare Tagalog to Dutch to German or any other language that I might have failed to mention thus far, it's simply unfair because each language was made uniquely by its own unique users for its own unique purposes. And that should apply to any dialect of English or any dialect of language or any language. Thank you.
I'm gonna have my fat head sons read since they be making so much noise. Start it. Go ahead. Read loud.
Further illustrating the negative stigma of the dialect and substantiating the young lady claims, we are informed because the dialect is one that's very close to standard English and is used by a group whose status is generally low. It gets branded as sloppy speaking, slang, or ghetto. The last label, although frightened with racial judgment, could at least make linguistic sense. We know that dialects emerge when there is geographical status in areas of
Stasis.
In areas of cities that are primarily black for a number of years, even decades. Distinctive ways of speaking are likely to develop more so, given that the isolation is in this case both physical and social.
Can you see that?
Give a brief history of the black dialect, which we could argue
Equates two. It's supposed to be two. Just say AAVE.
AAVE, describing black American dialects, are probably the result of
creolized form of English.
At one time spoken on the southern plantations by black slaves.
This creolized plantation
English appears to be related to Caribbean. Carrie?
Right here.
Yeah, Carrie.
The creolized
English spoken by some black in Jamaica, other Caribbean islands, through the interactions with white speech. The black dialect can no longer be considered true Creole dialects, but still they maintain many Creole features, structural characteristics. Africans who were captured as slaves and brought to the New World, forced to learn to use some type of English.
It's all right, man. Shut up. Because African American vernacular English is a dialect of the English language, it is an accurately assessed assumption to conclude that assimilation into American culture through acculturation is what influenced this linguistic phenomenon. We derogatorily recognize as Ebonics, but upon further research, Lisa Green, an assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics at the University of Texas in Austin, informs us of the current competing theories of the origin of what she terms African American English. Because AAVE is a dialect of the English language, it is an accurately assessed assumption to conclude that assimilation into the American culture through acculturation is what influenced the linguistic phenomenon. We derogatory recognize the I think I wrote that shit 2 times. It's all right. Why'd I go that way? This video.
If I can at least explain to some extent how the variety is systematic and what people do in different parts of the United States, they do the same things, and how they don't make certain kinds of mistakes, how they avoid certain kinds of constructions, how they would never produce, for example, you will hear speakers say quite often, he nice, he running, but you wouldn't hear those speakers say, I nice, I running. And you can see these patterns emerging as children are developing African American English. So I try to talk about how it's systematic, but I try to show that, people don't wake up at 15 and just start speaking African American English, that this is a system that's really in place early on, and children are working it out as they become older. And you don't really do that, I think, if you're doing something that's just kind of mistakes.
That nigga say you read better than PB is stupid, dog. That nigga say that nigga is stupid. Where's the thing at?
What, in the arrow?
Yeah.
That's right there.
No, that's not an arrow. There. All right. Go ahead.
In explaining over the years how multiple labels have given to
Read loud.
In explaining over the years how multiple labels have given to what she calls AAE, we get confirmation of the fair assumption I made in Black English being AAVE. Other labels include Negro dialect, non-standard, Negro English American Negro, Black communication, Black dialect of Black folk speech, Black street speech, Black English
vernacular,
Black vernacular English, Afro American English, African American English, African American language, and African American vernacular English. The publication also offers insight into the coining of the term Ebonics and why it wasn't included in the past labels. Robert Williams in 1973 intended for the term to cover the multitude of languages spoken by Black people, not just in the United States, but also those spoken in the Caribbean. Explaining over the years how multiple labels have given to what she calls AAE, we get confirmation of the fair assumption I made in Black English being AAVE. Other labels include Negro dialect, non-standard, Negro English, Negro English, American Negro, Black communication, Black dialect, Black folk speech, Black street speech, Black English, vernacular, the Black vernacular English, Afro-American English, American American English, African American English, and African American vernacular English. The publication also offers.
Don't worry. I don't know how the hell I did that. My bad. I didn't catch that. Another video. That's the dude right there.
I administered the test of 100 items to 100 whites and 100 black kids. The white kids did extremely poorly on it. The black kids did extremely well on it because it came out of their culture. So I was demonstrating that black kids were not deficient in IQ; they were just penalized on the test that they were taking.
And that's where the word Ebonics came from?
Right. Then later, I needed to name the terms that I had on the test, so I named them Ebonics, which combined ebony and phonics. I think comparative research is really racist because when you do comparative research, you go in with a hypothesis that the two are either the same or different, but you're really finding out how much difference exists between the two. And once you find out how much difference, you really don't know anything about the two groups that you're studying. You don't know the unique qualities of African Americans. You don't know the strengths. You don't look at the resilience of African Americans. You don't look at the emotional development. And I think that it's much more important to study blacks are blacks rather than to compare them. I did some research to show that black kids had different ways of labeling objects in their environment. For example, this is a test that was given to black kids. They put a toy behind this, what I'm sitting on. And the child was asked, point to the toy that is behind the sofa. Black kids missed that. Why did they miss it? That's right. They call it a couch. So I changed the language to point to the toy that's in back of the couch. Parents, forgot the basic parenting principles to expect and demand high achievement in their kids, so that there is a similarity between what's in the home expectation and what's going on at school. There's not a mismatch, but I think right now there's a mismatch in what's going on between what's going on in the home and what's going on in the community and what's going on in the school system. That those three are out of sync.
Even though Williams here mentioned slaves who have been forced to adapt to colonial circumstance of the many positions of the origin
of this
dialect.
Read loud like I remember how you was doing that day.
He and other scholars were off the position that its roots were in
Niger Congo.
Further analysis indicates that the term was never meant to be used
interchangeably
with African Americans.
English.
This scholar maintained that during the process of interaction with slaves, traders, Niger Congo grammar was
Dominant.
dominant, and that the extensive
word borrowing
from English does not make Ebonics a dialect of English. They felt that it was inaccurate to apply terminology that has been formulated to describe grammar of English, to describe African linguistic structures. These scholars' point are well taken, but at the same time, further research us need to confirm this assessment, and it is ongoing.
Did you mean to put is needed?
Probably.
The time for it's us is needed.
Typo. I'm gonna read this. We find that the exact placement of the Idru, Kru, and Dogon within the Niger-Congo tree remains to be determined, and that the unity of each of the following nodes needs to be better established, and Atlantic, New Kwa, and New Benue Congo, you gotta be quiet, Wide Bantu, Narrow Bantu, and Adamawa Ubangi. The macro classification is based on the method of resemblances, with refining based on lexostatistics paired with examination of shared innovations. The comparative method has mostly been applied at the micro level to specific subgroups. A comprehensive reconstruction of Niger-Congo, including the establishment of sound laws, remains the major future task. Linguist Robert Blench further substantiate this fact in his article, where he states, "You also can't reconstruct a language phylum unless you have a convincing model of its internal structure. In this case, Niger-Congo, this is of particular importance. There is an extensive literature discussing the likely noun classes, verbal extensions, word order, and so on, the Niger-Congo. But there are, for example, a number of branches where there is no evidence for noun classes, such as Dogon, Iju Mande, and the Kwaklak, Denmark. Is this because they have been lost? If so, it is incumbent on the proponents to demonstrate how this occurred. Dogon, for example, has no labial velars and no evidence of ATR vowels, which are present almost everywhere else. If they were indeed lost, the proponents of the proponents which were present, if they were indeed lost, the proponents of their presence in Proto-Niger-Congo phonology should be able to demonstrate sound correspondences indicating their former existence in Proto-Dogon. Needless to say, crucial analytic studies of this type do not exist. Go ahead.
As more
read loud.
As more data that has
That's not loud, boy.
As more data that has become available, such as historical conversation of the ex-slave narratives and Hudo text knowledge has expanded. Kikongo, Mende, Kwari, viewed
Are
as
viewed as
the languages AAE gets its patterns from. The view is that it gets a structure from West Africa, but only bears
superficial
superficial
resemblances.
resemblance or similarities to General English. A for a full of treatment that
On that
on
position,
that position, this position is identified as the
substratus
substratus
hypothesis.
hypothesis, suggesting West African language influence or sentence and sound structure. Let me see what it does.
Mhm.
The other position is that it started off Creole like Jamaican Creole and
Gola
Gola. A Creole is a language that develops
from a pigeon.
from a pidgin, simplified means of communication among speakers who do not speak the same language. Creoles differ from pigeons in that they have native speakers and they are characterized by more distinctive vocabulary and grammar.
Proponents of the
Proponents of the
Creoles
Creolist theory view the possibilities of African slaves in the West Indies, slave bringing with them their own Creole. The sources that give an attempt to validate are
verb phrase patterns in
verb
Black Creole.
phrase patterns in Black Land Creole.
Go ahead.
The last theory basically dealt with the positions of the origin being from English via contacts with whites through slavery. This is known as the Anglicis
view.
Huh?
I guess Anglicis.
Anglicis view. The focus here is on data from areas African Americans settled in the 18th and 19th century who are argued to be good data sources because they may use a variety of English that is very close to the varieties used by early Africans in America. Other
efforts
To
link AAE to its
Just go read it.
original sources have led linguists to ex-slave narratives, which consist of recordings of former slaves who were born between 1844 and 1861. The positions relies on
quantitative
analysis of certain features used to argue the grammatical core has its origin in an English based. If we consider socio-historical factors, then questions are raised on the likelihood of AAVE developed from a Gula like Creole. If we consider historical factors, then questions are raised on the likelihood of AAVE
developing from Creole. Within that position, there is also a position blended of a mix of Anglicists of dialectologist and Creole position where, like the Creolists, view the emergence of the current AAVE as gradual after offer, but was never actually being a Creole, still being essentially created by Africans. Winford view is the AAE developed out of contact with between European and Africans in the South during the 17th century.
Conclusion. Code switching is the practice of switching back and forth between two different languages or dialects. Code switching is more prevalent in conversation than writing. Usually when people are bilingual, they switch. A couple terms in which code switching is employed usually involve trying to hide fluency or maybe cover up lapses in other language. Linguists take interest in when these circumstances occur, while sociologists are interested in why.
Go ahead, CJ.
Code switching functions to announce specific identities, create certain meanings and faculties. Facilitate particular interpersonal relationships. Different affectives, intergroups, communication. Though hiding memories of a second language is a function. It's supposed
to say only. My bad.
It's only
account
for 10% of usage, marking informal and formal situations, airing important functions as well. African American vernacular is a dialect of.
Dr. Williams' intention for Ebonics was to label the multitude of languages Black people spoke, not just African Americans, which therefore suggests distinction. Robert Williams created the term Ebonics, combining ebony and phonics. Evidence does not allow us to draw firm conclusions on the origins of African American vernacular, as there are several competing positions based on available evidence. Contact with English-speaking Europeans is more than likely how African American vernacular English developed in the midst of colonialization and acculturation through means of assimilation. Franz
Fanon
colonized people. In other words, people in whom an inferiority complex has taken root, whose local cultural originality has been committed to the grave position themselves in relation to the civilizing language, i.e. the metropolitan culture. The more the colonialized has assimilated the cultural values of the metropolis, the more he will have escaped the bush. This echoes and sums up my conclusion. Good job, y'all. That's it. We got the sources. Sources there, sources in the description. What y'all think?
Yep. Good.
Thank y'all. This is a good way to keep y'all quiet. And y'all might have to come back up in here a couple more times. Every time y'all start making noise, I'm gonna make y'all come in here and do that. Stop sharing the screen. Go into the chat. They said, hope he don't got them going. Nah, they go. Their mama wouldn't let them even much dress like that. We don't support Islam or nation. Nah, we don't do that. There's no hair to behold, no way. Mexicans are mastering that. that was a good thing that I was thinking about. Pure black. We always be. I know my grandma and a lot of people. They be like, they need to learn how to speak English, and yet they always be fussing at the essays for speaking Spanish, but we don't even realize them boys is having the code switch like that. They can't help it. He say, I paid them Sour Patches. Hey, they say, well done, y'all.
Thank you.
Boy said, well done.
He said,
Yeah,
"Hey,
man.
the Chappers paid them in Sour Patches."
Look, y'all can be seen, huh?
He didn't pay us no Sour Patches.
They go Kyrie.
It's
They go
dark.
CJ. Because we got the thing in here. We got a light though, but yeah, man. I appreciate everybody for coming in. Hopefully it was informative. You know what I'm saying? I kind of had it cooking for a long. I really needed to go in here and get that because I've been needing to put it in presentation mode. It's been a long time. We need to go get volume 4. That's where a lot of that is, and it's a lot of other fire stuff in volume 4 that they ain't really just talked about. You know what I'm saying? They do it. They write so many books and deal with so many articles and stuff. So I don't blame them boys. You know what I'm saying? My brothers be really, really putting it 9 out here. You know what I'm saying? But that's just the type of stuff that we not hurting for no content at all by any means. We not piggybacking off no content from nobody. We will never. That ain't what they ain't start off like that. Ever since before I even got on here, them boys was already had a whole catalog. So don't do that. Don't start that type of shit, bro. But yeah. Peace to y'all, man. I appreciate y'all coming in. We finna get ready to start this football game. You know what I'm saying? North Houston Oilers, you know what I'm saying? Watch out for that boy Travis McCray. Watch out for Kyrie Davis McCray. You know what I'm saying? The boys is on their way up. You feel me? You know what I'm saying? Hopefully. My boy CJ was at practice the other day. He hit stick him. Hopefully we can get some of that action. You know what I'm saying, today? Hopefully Kyrie can get an interception. Hopefully they let him run the ball and let him get about 100 real fast. You know what I'm saying? But like I say, man, I appreciate y'all, and I am out.
Peace to the homies.
Hold on, wait a minute. I got to play them out. I forgot I got my video. You know what I'm saying?
He said, peace to the homies.
Yeah. That's what we here. Yeah, gotta play y'all out there. Hold on.
Serious about the money. Serious about the money.
I'm on the Elka, I'm a chromed out 1100. What we doing? Getting money. What we doing? Getting money. What they doing? Hating on us, but they never cross. EMG, Country Band, and Santana the Bow.
Serious.
Turn up for that chick.
Serious about the money. Serious.
Turn up for that chick.
Serious about the money.
Nigga, we smash on whoever. Ice so cold, bought my chain a little sweater. I'm done.
Tell him what position you play.
I play D end and D top.
What you play, Kyrie?
I play inside wide receiver, running back, and I play corner.
And sometimes I play outside linebacker.
Boys versatile out here. You know what I'm talking about? Athletes, monsters, the baby monsters. All right, peace to the fam, man. We out.